Hello, this is Adam Holt, founder and CEO of Asset Map, recovering financial planner, and I'm excited to share with you something we've been working on for quite some time that's missing in the entire industry, and that is what we call relationship maps. Now, if you're like me, I think you know that the biggest motivation for pretty much every household is who is important to them and who is on the bus with them, who's in the back seat, who are they taking care of? Because it turns out a lot of the financial decisions that we are all making are very seldom about us when we really think about it. In fact, maybe some of those things like saving to make sure we can cover emergency reserves or perhaps investing for the long term to provide our retirement. Once our families get larger, which gets more complicated, and now they're both dependencies, there are interdependencies, there are obligations to other people, and there may be actually things that I have to think about both generationally as well as laterally amongst my siblings, my peers, my business owners, my companies that I need to pay attention to. So the opportunity to actually have a discussion with a client has been something that's been eluding financial planning software for a long time. And we wanted to solve that with relationship maps. Now, you're probably already cataloging a lot of the information about a household member. The single individual may be married to another person or has a partnership in some form with another individual. Sometimes they have children. So we want to make sure we catalog the intimate family. And we generally do a good job of that. Showing that, though, is really important because once I can present it back to the client, say, hey, does this represent what you understand to be the most important financial interdependencies that I need to pay attention to? Who am I dependent upon? Who's dependent upon me? These are really critical questions that we need to understand. And more than anything else, understanding these interdependencies can help us frame priorities and other important discussions that will motivate the client to move forward and make sometimes difficult decisions. I encourage you to create this process with either new clients or with existing clients to help frame the conversation that you understand who is most important to them. Now, many advisors have cataloged relationships in the list view, right? Which is very common for most of us. Who's the primary person? Who's their spouse or partner? What's their son or their children, right? This tends to get cataloged very easily. But we also need the opportunity to have conversations of other financial interdependencies, including perhaps a mother-in-law or a generation zero in the case of my clients being generation one, maybe a capital partner with whom I have business relationships, business partners, trustees. In fact, I might even have legal entities and so forth that might be part of my household for which I have financial ownership, interest, control, or I benefit from. In fact, there might even be other people that are part of this household, like business consultants, and maybe even myself as a professional advisor, right? So there's me, I'm their professional advisor. These are all individuals and entities that can have a legal relationship or financial relationship with our clients. How do we start having a conversation about them visually? Watch what I'm going to do here. What you're going to see when I click on visual is the default view of something that we would commonly call a family tree. What it's doing is it's taking our primary individuals or this generation, and it's effectively putting them side by side if there's a partner and or spouse. Then it's also looking at our children's generation here. So if there are dependents are going to be underneath. And then of course, if there are parents, they're going to also be cataloged in this generation. We've left this very clean so that you can choose to go and make any kind of distinction that you want. But this is also here by default a hub if you need to connect multiple connections, because we recommend that the next thing you do is connect this to understand. Now, I really love doing this live with a client because I can put down the people that are part of this household by default, but I want to also understand the relationship. If I already know that these individuals are married, I might be inclined to simply connect them via this line by just connecting these two dots. If I learn that Sarah is a child of both Betsy and Ben, I would just draw those lines by clicking on the dot. But it turns out actually Thomas is from a prior marriage, and so I might be inclined to illustrate that in this way. Betsy's mom, Millie, is actually over her, so I'm just going to drag her here, and we'll include that there. So you get the idea of what I've done here. I could choose to add any kind of text here by adding a text box and maybe explaining that relationship or concerns. Because this is free-form text, I can ask all kinds of questions like, what is a estate plan? And I can use this to frame conversations when I come into the meeting. If I was showing this to Ben and Betsy and they were in my office, and I framed the question like this: I took 2 minutes here to create what I would call a family tree to understand the financial interdependencies that are going on currently in your household. Please help me understand if I've got this right. Okay, let's just take 2 minutes. Ben and Betsy, here you are. I've got the 2 kids. You can see that Sarah is your joint child. Thomas is from Ben's prior. Millie's a little bit dependent. Betsy is helping to take care of her. She's living off of the assets that her late husband left to her in trust. By the way, what's the estate plan here? Do we need to think about ways and techniques to help her? What's her organizational level? Do we need to do this asset mapping for mom? There's going to be all kinds of things that I think are really important for you to frame once this is confirmed. Now, you might notice at the very bottom, there's a whole bunch of other boxes here which look similar to the asset map, and they indicate every other legal entity or person that is already in this household. Now, you can see I've taken time to put this in here. I've put in the business partners and the capital partners to their business, including their advisors, as well as some entities you might notice here, such as Dad's Trust. Now, I don't manage this, but watch what happens when I click on this. I can now bring it in and I can put it where I want it to. And of course, I can create some connections. In fact, what happens here is that Millie has a trust that her husband left for her, and ultimately it will pass down to Betsy. I don't have to describe or put dollar values here to create more complexity. The key here is to show relationship, is not to show financial movement. If you wanted to include some form of text box that explains that, you're certainly able to do that by creating another text box like this. Let me show you some really interesting ways that other advisors have shared with us. I'm going to go down to the bottom here and I'm going to change this map, and I'm going to show the Franklin family map. Here's what I did just before jumping on with you. I actually took the time to write out these little text boxes. I added text box Gen 1, 2, and 3 because I wanted to have an intentional conversation. Notice it looks very similar to what I just showed you. I just added the special needs trust because it turns out Sarah has also special needs. And there's some things I need to think about. Where would I use this in an advisory conversation when this is on the screen? Well, if you're already knowledgeable about financial services, you know that there's a lot of things that need to happen when you have complexity such as that, which you're seeing here. You've got multiple generations, you've got split interests in a modern family between kids that may be disinherited. You've got a lot of wealth potentially on the right side of this line, maybe not a lot on the left side. Betsy tends to think of Tommy as basically her son, and so therefore she wants him to be part of the inheritance. But of course, the way the trust is set up with her mom, it's going to completely skip him because he's not in the lineage. We also know that because there's a special needs situation, we may not want trust assets to come directly to Sarah because that would affect her benefits from the state. And so there's lots of different conversations and opportunities that we can have to help fix or put in structure and or legal documents and or reorganize the finances to make sure we're being both fair and appealing to all the parties based upon what they care about. A really amazing way for us to frame the conversation with our clients is by putting this in front of them and asking deep questions. Now, it may require that you need some expertise, maybe the legal, the tax, the insurance, or the investment expertise. And I'd encourage you in your own teams or with our teams to reach out and say, what would you do here? Or how would you think about this? What's the conversation that we need to have? What are the problems you see with this layout? Is there something that we should install? And it's really effective for framing conversations with our clients using this. So I encourage you, the first and best benefit of the relationship map is the easiest form, which is just to start with all of the things that we know and exist and understanding the relationships. I encourage you to do that at every annual review meeting to make sure that we are on the same page. Sometimes we do this before the asset map display so that we don't get stuck in the weeds. We just show this and say, hey, I took the liberty of making this just like I made an asset map for you. I made you a family map. I want to understand if I've got my stuff straight before I make any recommendations going forward. Another version that we've seen that's pretty popular these days is using this for estate flow. And you can see this is a different version that we've included here. And I'm just going to zoom in here to make this a little bit more legible. But we've included different people in this case. Sometimes we want to show how there's intent between treating the kids equally. I did mention there's a special needs trust, and that obviously benefits Sarah. But it turns out Betsy is also making a lot of decisions about this trust and has implied her best friend, Vanessa, to be the trustee. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Vanessa, like most friends that are trustees, don't really know what their obligations are And this is a great opportunity for me to say, listen, I think maybe I need to have a conversation with Vanessa to explain to her her role in managing this special needs trust and the decisions that she's going to need to make. If there's assets held by this trust, I definitely want to have a relationship with Vanessa because that is effectively my client and will be for generations. So the key here is I want to show them that I'm in a pivotal role as their financial advisor in helping to make decisions around this. Would you please introduce me to Vanessa? Let's set up a meeting. The same thing is true for the trust that benefits mom. I know this will probably be my client's asset at some point, but there's a lot of complexity here that I need to pay attention to, not the least of which I already mentioned, which is what happens when assets move. Can we make sure that this trust benefits the special needs trust as opposed to Sarah directly as it is named in the trust that grandpa set up years and years and years before maybe Sarah was even born? So that's going to be a really important aspect for me to pay attention to. And again, I'm asking who is the attorney that is involved with this trust and possibly decanting it. It's Meredith, and I want that relationship. I probably want a referral to Meredith so I can talk to her about this. If I get permission, and I will explain to Meredith, here is the current condition. Do you think I might create some utility or value with Meredith if I show her this whole complexity? I think she's going to see ways that she can help as well. And that's going to be an opportunity to bring in another advocate. You might notice here that we also have a family business that was set up originally by Betsy's dad that Millie has stepped into. Jeff Levy is the business partner. He's getting older and probably wants to exit the business. Do I need to think about buy-sell planning? And this is a fantastic way to promote the idea that there's areas that we need to help that are outside of the traditional bubble of our clients, that these are opportunities to help here, to maybe help out here with this trust, to help here, and of course, maybe even help mom as we move on down, given the fact that Betsy is going to have to deal with the complexity of probably dealing with her siblings, which might also sit out here, and they might be wondering, where's our money? You're the executor. We want that to be resolved. And there's a lot of challenges that tend to happen in this situation. Check out this other map that someone else actually inspired us to make. We call this important roles and functions or entities. In this case, this family tends to have a little bit more complexity, and you can see here that sometimes we want to force a conversation about the structure of these things. It's just a different way of looking at it, and we simply just drag these boxes to add to this. I'm just going to add Thomas to it and say, okay, maybe Thomas is part of this, as well as getting rid of him by just hitting the delete key. It's important sometimes for us to think about who are their advisors and what's the role that we play. We very often don't allow other advisors to participate in the conversation because we keep those separate. Well, now we may be able to not only invite them, but show them that we're putting John in the conversation that we're also having with the family. We're including Meredith as an important asset of the families. And this is really critical today as we collaborate with other team members for family that may not be part of our infrastructure, might not be part of our team or our firm. And I think it's really interesting. You'll see I put myself here as their financial advisor because I am the financial advisor. I get my own color. It does stand out. And it's a really effective way to show not only your own team who's contributing to this family, but also their own complexity. I encourage you to try this first with yourself, but then also do this with some of your more important clients. Showing them a different view of their life we know has incredible utility, just like the asset map. And it's a great way to show that you're thinking bigger than just the asset allocation and the accounts under management. It's important to have this frame so that we can work up and down generations. And of course, I encourage you to test, build something new, and share that with us. If you are using Asset Map and haven't spent much time with relationship maps, take some of the materials that we put together and make sure that you try them, use them, or schedule some time with our customer success team to really power up and try to use this live with a client. If Asset Map is new to you, make sure you schedule a demo now and get this experience. You understand what other advisors are doing and find a great way to deliver your advisor intelligence. With that, I'll say my goodbyes and I'll wish you best of luck in all your advice delivery.